Good morning, flower friends. Back for another DIY floral session. We've got a really fun some really fun floral varieties this week. Really special, one of my favorite super seasonal flowers, Mimosa. They have these really fun, beautiful yellow fuzzy petals on them. It's in the acacia family, which is why if you've ever seen purple acacia, has a similar type of foliage. So nice long sturdy stems, such a fun, really special and hyper seasonal type of flower. And it's more of like a pod flowering branch. We really only get to see it for couple months a year in this early, this is quite early, so January is quite early for a mimosa. Usually we'll see it kind of end of January into February, maybe March, but it sort of depends on when it's fresh and growing. So really excited to have our yellow mimosa this week. Ooh, Forsythia. This is one of the first blooming branches that's available. Also typically comes into season, late January, beginning into February and March. It also depends on the seasonality. So it has been a bit of a cold winter that can pop open some of these buds. And you'll probably have something that looks a lot like mine. Doesn't really look like much just yet. But these little buds that are all closed on your Forsythia branches will start to pop open. This is such an evocative blooming branch for me because I grew up and had this in our yard. And it just reminds me of, honestly, it reminds me of Easter egg hunts. But this time of year is the time when we get to enjoy our blooming branches. So from now until kind of the end of March, we'll be able to see some of these really pretty woody stems with blossoms like peach blossom and plum. Prunus is another one that's a really gorgeous pruning branch, and of course cherry, which we'll see later in the spring. But Forsythia is one that's really reliable and we can get it fairly early. So we're kind of starting to see it now at the beginning of January, which is exciting. And of course our yellow tulips, one of my favorite classic flowers that really you can get all year round, but especially in the springtime is when they look the best, and when we can, oftentimes we get them from Holland, but they're such a special flower, and they're heat seeking. You may know, I may have mentioned before about tulips, which means that they will follow the warm air, which is why you'll see these really pretty curvy shapes in your tulips as they change. And one little trick that I'll show you right now is a way to get this tulip to uncurve a little bit. So I've got my kind of curvy stem. I could use it like this and just let it sort of be this beautiful bendy shape, and knowing that it'll probably change, which is sort of a fun thing to have in your arrangement. But if you just gently move your finger down the stem like that, oh my goodness, you can see it's like starting to straighten out a little bit. Now I'm going as gently as possible because it's very easy to snap your stem, which is a bummer. If you do snap your stem, you could always pop this in a bud vase. But what I'm doing is I'm moving the water cells from this tulip. And you can do this with any of those spring stems that are sort of rubbery and turgid. Got that word out of the dictionary today. But these sort of rubbery stems, calla lilies are another one. You can almost straighten them out a little bit just by gently running your thumb and forefinger along the stem. Now, another thing to remember about our tulips they will grow. They'll continue to grow after we cut them. So I usually anchor mine a little bit lower in my arrangement. I'm actually going to start with the Forsythia, and I'm designing in our mason jar vase today. So I've got my clippers, and we'll start with our Forsythia branches to get a little bit of height. And because these aren't opened yet, we can leave them a little bit up and out from the arrangement. So take a look at your Forsythia branch. The pieces on the bottom are probably not going to do much. I may put one of them in here, but go ahead and stem split your stem right here. And then usually the tip pieces are the ones that are going to be a little bit more active for us. So I'll clip my Forsythia branches, and I'm going to leave a lot of the height on them because it'll have that really dramatic effect that echoes the shape of the bush in springtime. So look at your stems and find the spot where you can see those cluster of buds. This part is not going to do anything for me because it doesn't have any buds on it, and not everything may open up. Sometimes it's like a little bit of a gamble with these smaller buds, but the ones that are going to be really reliable for you are the ones that look like this. You can see these tiny little closed yellow buds. So this is like my prime branch right here that I'm going to put right in the center. Oh, this just feels like those Easter egg trees. I know we don't all celebrate Easter. Maybe we celebrate spring in a different way, but when I was little, I loved to hang colored eggs on a little twig tree. Kind of reminds me of this. So again, it's not that exciting yet, but in a couple of days, maybe even by the end of today, I'm gonna pull off one little blossom that got smushed. These little yellow buds will pop open and decorate this gorgeous little spring twiggy shape. Let's do our mimosa next. So I've got two really robust branches. So I'm gonna stem split this into half. So find kind of the center point. We want to also try to preserve as much of this beautiful yellow tufting as possible. So now I've got two pieces, and I'll pull off all this bottom foliage. Get that off. This especially is such a leafy foliage. These tiny little, they look like little fossils, kind of a fossil shape. Will get into the water and create more bacterial growth. So go ahead and pull off all of the foliage from the lower branches, and maybe even some up into the center so that it doesn't drop off and fall into the water. I'm gonna leave those little puffs on the edge because I think they're really pretty, accented with the bright yellow. It's sort of a cool, almost blue-green eucalyptus color. And then I'll fill in some of the bottom parts of my stem. And for these really woody stems, this mimosa tends to have quite a thick stem. You may even want to just cut right up the center of the stem to get a little bit more water in there. We do that with a lot of our woody stems, like viburnum. Lilac is another one, not in season quite yet, but you can give it a little stem split. And then I'll just let these fluffy guys splay out and fill up kind of the base of my, you know, it's a shame, this piece, so this piece that I split, I'm gonna have to pull off some of these little guys at the base So what I would do with these at home is make a little companion bud vase. So I've cleaned off the bottom of my stem. Oof, probably have to take off a little bit more. But these are just so pretty, these little pieces. Get one of those tiny little bud vases, and then you have a companion arrangement that you can put somewhere at home, maybe in your powder room. Powder room sounds so much more elegant than the old bathroom, but that's what it feels like when there's flowers and it suddenly becomes the powder room. And I'll let these little puffy guys kind of cascade. Their natural shape has a little bit of droop to it. So anchoring it in the center can help to let that beautiful natural shape splay out. And some of these you may see are kind of still closed. So it's a little hard to see, but these ones have not quite popped yet. I'm gonna stem split this again. So those will open up. So if they're not as fluffy as mine, in the next couple of days, they will fully open up. I know it's sad to see those bottom pieces go. Another fun idea for your little guys is you could press them. If you've ever taken a class with me at Flowers for Dreams, you'll know that we had a flower pressing class. It's very easy to make a little press, and then all these little pieces that we can't get into the arrangement, you can press them and use them for other little floral crafts if that's your style. I make earrings out of them, so I'll put resin in. I'll put floral in resin. You could do it in a frame, all kinds of fun stuff to use with your little tiny scraps. I also love to forage. We actually had a mimosa tree in my backyard growing up, so I was lucky enough to have the pink version of this. It's actually a weed tree, so it's not super desirable and not used a lot in landscaping, but for those just couple weeks a year, they had gorgeous pink fluffy blossoms that were just like pink snow. Oh, look at that. Just a lovely cascade of fun yellow puffs. Love mimosa. The tree also comes with charming feature of this weed tree, these little pods that drop. So after they've had their moment in the sun, blooming in the early spring, they drop these pods everywhere. That's the not so fun part about kind of a weedy plant. But you know, for me, it's a trade-off. You get to enjoy it during that beautiful time of year. Okay, I've got my mimosa in there, and I kind of kept it a little low. So this gives my Forsythia the room to breathe. And we always know, like with these closed flowers, if you get something that's super closed, you want to give it some room to breathe, excluding our tulips. Tulips will put a little bit lower. Mine are very fresh and closed. So they don't look like much, but they'll pop open. So we'll add our tulips next. I'm not going to adjust most of these just because it would take forever. But again, if you do want to use that trick to reorient some of your tulips, if you're like, man, this shape is really not working for me, I'm gonna anchor these lower, even though they're tightly closed. And normally with tightly closed flowers, you want to leave them some room. These tulips grow really quickly, and they will grow even as much as an inch a day. So maybe turn your arrangement, figure out where the front and back is. I like to create triangles, so if I were to look over the top of my arrangement, I've got boom, 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 little triangle. You can also, if you want to try salvaging some of these tulip foliage. You could even use that as a really pretty pop of foliage in your arrangement. And I like to see my arrangements changing. So I love to see tulips moving around, opening up. They get mistaken a lot for being dead when they're like that, but not to worry, they're not dead. They're just heat seeking, so they will probably change shape a little bit. So all my tulips are kind of clustered really low, and that's on purpose to get, because I know in a couple of days they will just pop open. I'm gonna add one more little tulip foliage, and then maybe my last tulip in the front. Ooh, so this will just come alive. A chorus of yellow, if you will, that just will brighten up any, I know we've been having, at least in Chicago, a lot of these gloomy days. I don't know if any of you in Milwaukee and Detroit are getting these gray days. So hopefully this is a really fun pick-me-up to get you through this week and beyond. And maybe try pressing your mimosa leftovers, and then tell me how it went, if it works. Sometimes it's a guessing game as to whether your pressings will work. Sometimes they mold, but you can always do this. If you don't have a flower press, you can take a book, really heavy book, maybe one of your cookbooks, and put some parchment paper in the middle of the book and just pop these little guys in there. Even maybe try some of the foliage too and see how that works out. I'd love to know if you're able to successfully press some of your leftovers, and we'll enjoy this beautiful yellow Forsythia, mimosa, and tulips until next week.